We do have some echo, but I'm happy to report that we do have a quorum.
This mute button's going to be fun. So you know that the Vice Chair Hernandez is en route.
I see that he is connected presently.
Okay, great. Yeah, and he will be there in person in a few minutes. He's just on his way there. So I'm just getting set up in here. We do have a quorum. That's fantastic. I will not be able to see people's hands in the meeting, so I will rely on you. Who is present in the room? I see Cynthia, Jim, and Ernie.
Yes.
Woohoo! And then, do we have any members of the public present in the chambers or in the meeting room?
There are no members of the public present in the chambers.
Excellent. Okay, then we will start here by asking you to do a roll call. Oh, welcome to the October 16th, 2023 meeting of the East Bay Community Energy AVA Community Advisory Committee. If you could please take roll call and establish quorum.
Absolutely, thank you. Member Landry.
Present.
Member Hugh. Member Liu.
Yes.
Member Swaminathan.
Present.
Member Lakshmi. Member Pacheco. Here. Member Souza. Member Souza. I see that Member Souza is connected, but has not responded. I will come back to Member Souza. Member Carr.
Present.
Member Lutz.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Hernandez. Vice Chair Hernandez. I will come back to Vice Chair Hernandez and Chair Elderman.
Present.
And I see that Vice Chair Hernandez is indicating that he is here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, so the first thing that we are going to do is go to public comment. I do want to stress that, so when I'm looking over here, I'm taking notes. I'm not paying attention to you, two screens. I do want to confirm that everybody who is attending remotely from a remote location is in the location that they posted their posted on the agenda.
Yes,
So,
please. I'm here.
great. Oh, Member Souza's here for the record. Member Liu, are you in the location that you said you would be?
Yes, I'm in Starbucks.
Excellent. Member Carr, are you in the location you intended to be?
Yes, please.
Great. And Member Swaminathan?
Yes.
Fantastic. All right, so we will go now to public comment. And for the public, this period is for items we do not have on the agenda. If we have something on the agenda, there will always be public comment at that time. And so please do hold your comments on those items until that time. So first we will go to, oh, sorry, you can do this part, Adrian. We have members of the public with their hands raised.
Yes. Local Clean Energy Alliance, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Hi, everyone. This is Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Energy Alliance. And I wanted to address local development business plan, what it is, and why it's so important. The intent of the local development business plan was to create community benefits within East Bay community energy territory. Really programs around energy efficiency, electrification, distributed energy resources, reducing our energy waste, and includes energy resilience and community innovation grants. What's really important is also the jobs created in all those fields. Who they're created for and where really matters to us. And the same with energy assets. What and for who and where in our communities. So it's really important. I want to uplift that it's kind of overdue for an evaluation of our local development investments. We need to see metrics on all these projects created. We need to update the local development business plan, especially now that it's no longer just the East Bay area, but also includes San Joaquin County cities. And I know that East Bay Community Energy or Ava Community Energy could be doing a whole lot better to reinvest the money that we pay towards electricity back into the community in the form of these community benefits, assets, and building resilience, including the microgrids we've been asking for. Clean power to the people. Thank you.
So Jessica, your reception was cutting out a little bit, at least for me. Was that accurate for other people as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so a lot of the words that you used in there are really important words. And so the parts that I heard made a lot of sense, but I feel like we may have missed some of the nuance. So if you could email those to the clerk, I would request that they get distributed to the members of this body and attached to the meeting minutes. Okay, and then I don't see anybody else with their hand raised, and there are still no members of the public in the chambers. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And all right, there's that. So, okay, cool. Then having no more public comment, we will move now to the next agenda item, which is approval of minutes from September 18th, 2023. Are there?
I'll move to accept minutes.
I'll second.
That was moved by
Pacheco.
Member Pacheco and seconded by Member Landry. We'll go first. Are there any public comment, written correspondence received on this item, or any members of the public with their hands raised?
There have been no comments received regarding the minutes, and there are no hands raised. I'd also like to recognize that Member Hugh has arrived, and Member Lachman are present. But there are no hands raised for public comment about the minutes.
All right, Member, who can you confirm that you are in the location that's posted on the agenda? Is that a yes? You're muted. Yes, okay.
Yes, thank you.
I saw the nod. And then Member Lakshman, are you in the
Yes.
location you said? Great. Okay, so I am going to, I just walked in and got the library opened up just as I sat down, so I have to pull up the chair report. And so we'll move that a little bit later in the agenda. If we could go straight into the update on net billing tariff, all right, and the glorious bit here is that I don't believe that staff has provided us anyone to present on this topic because we heard it last month. But maybe that has changed as the chair of the board requested that we discuss this. Do we have anyone here to do this, or shall I just do my best?
The staff is not here to present to this item.
Okay, so let me pull up the minutes from last time. So we did have a report on this. There was some really, really good questions, some very solid discussion that came from this item. There was a list of questions that were presented and some super solid help from Member Souza. I just want to recognize that. So we came up with a recommendation, or like some comments to the board. There was some general concerns, and but we spoke with CEO Chassett, and were assured that the reason that this was being brought forth was that it was the recommendation was being actually brought forth by the Solar Association, and I tend to go along, you know, like, okay, this is something that affects solar, we would want to listen to the Solar Association. So talked with a friend who works for the Solar Association, and we just must be talking to different solar associations. There's definitely more than one out there in the world. The feedback that I got, though, was some pretty great alarm. And it was presented to us that our board has actually signed a resolution, and many of the elected members on the board of directors have signed resolutions in opposition to this particular thing that is being brought forth for consideration. And so I was hoping that we would have somebody here tonight from there, but maybe they will maybe they'll be going to the board as opposed to the CAC. But I really wanted to make sure as a body we had the opportunity to talk about a recommendation being put forward that is in direct conflict with a resolution that that we've passed. It was actually with our recommendation that we opposed this type of tariff for the reasons that were brought up in our discussion last time. I didn't recognize it as the same thing. It may have a different name now, but it's the same thing. And maybe it does have the same name. So I'm just wondering if there's like, do you, Adrian, do you have the recommendations from last time? I'm looking here and it's not in the minutes that I see.
I do have the presentation and the staff report for the presentation that was given in September.
Okay, so I'm looking online and the CAC chair report isn't linked. So I can't pull it up. So it'd be helpful if it were linked.
For you're looking for the September CAC or
I'm probably on the wrong day. This is harder online. We used to do everything online and it was easy, and now all of a sudden I'm like, so let me go to the previous meeting. Do you have the 920? Okay. CAC report. Okay, so the recommendation that we brought forth last time should be written in red here. I don't remember what it is. But do we have any folks who would like to talk about this? Are there any members of the board who want to revisit? I really want to get pulled up what we brought to the board on this topic. And I don't have it here.
I have some questions.
That'd be great. Go for it, Member Letts.
And this is based not on the presentation or discussion at the last CAC, but I did get a chance to sort of skim through the presentation. And I was hoping to ask staff these questions. But, so I have 5 main ones. Why is this still net metering? It's artificially limiting the size of solar systems if you tie it to the load of the building that it's in. And it seems like, especially if storage is available, that EVCE would encourage people to build out as much solar and storage as possible, just to help EVCE. The other question was the rates were based on an avoided cost calculation that the PUC does. And I've heard people vigorously complain about the PUC's avoided cost calculator, that it artificially excludes benefit of local production to the system, such as reduced congestion and perhaps being able to delay transmission line construction. Another one that I thought was maybe just a typo and wanted to confirm it, but the staff, this is a quote, staff expects to return to the board no later than December 2024. And that, is 2024 a typo? That they're not going to get things figured out till the end of next year?
Where is that?
It was in the presentation. I'll have to look at it, but I don't remember the page. And then it says PG&E will be billing for delivery charges on the solar billing plan tariff. And it seemed to me that the presentation was implying that EVCE would be following PG&E rate. And shouldn't EVCE decide what's best for EVCE itself and for its customers, and to do what EVCE thinks is best, not what PG&E thinks is best? And, what is if a customer installs solar and storage, what's that value to EVCE? And can EVCE use that as a virtual power plant and make sure that it's installed so that it can be used as a virtual power plant and pay the customer that? So those were a bunch of questions for EVCE. And then a sort of a larger one, in there it says fixed and non-bypassable charges are going to be included, but it sounds like they're going to be included, I'm not sure on what, but it seems like that's a fixed cost that should be based on the size of the drop to the house, what the ampacity is, what the capacity is, because that's what PG&E is providing, is the connection to the grid, and it shouldn't be blended in with generation charges. So that's just, why are they doing it that way? That's beyond EBCE, so I don't expect an answer from EBCE, but just a complaint.
Thank you, Jim. I want to take a moment and make sure that the members of the CAC are familiar with what we're talking about. Can you pull up the presentation from last time, Adrian? And I pulled up the comments that we submitted, which really, member Souza wrote up, and I just am very grateful for that. Mickey, the insights in here are really very strong, and if you are able to connect with me after this, I just want to make sure you have a chance to talk to the board about it. So it was this presentation, and the concept is that we're moving away from net energy metering and moving into this thing called net billing tariff. A lot of our concerns around it focused on the effect of removing economic incentives for rooftop solar, and a lot of the public pushback has been around eliminating, like completely eliminating the economic supports for rooftop solar, not only for residential, but for like community solar, for farming, for schools, for things like that. It removes the financial support for folks to go into this, and it means that that instead of like we have to buy our power back if we create solar energy from our roof and have to buy it back later, we actually have to buy it back at retail, as opposed to having credits for the energy that we put in. I'm going to encourage remote members to mute your microphone unless you're speaking. Mickey wrote up some really good comments, and they're page 58 of the CAC report, which means that we had a lot of attachments on this one. And so I'm going to encourage folks to take a look at that. My understanding is that the board will not be hearing this topic this month. Adrian, can you confirm that's true?
That's true.
Okay, so this is going to be coming back to us. We'll bring some information to the board about it. I know the chair has received communications from members of the public, and so definitely wants to have a discussion on this. My concern is that if we don't bring this back soon for discussion, then staff will not have the ability or the time to create an alternative if that is the direction from the board. And so I'm hoping that our staff hear that. Alex, you're on here.
Whatever we say.
Pardon?
The Jaco stack, whatever we say when we're saying, I would like to make comment on that.
I'm having a hard time. Wow, this is really educational. I'm having a hard time understanding you. Can you say that again?
But Jaco, when I would like to comment when appropriate.
Now is a great time.
Okay, so I know we talked about this last meeting, and I don't remember, and I haven't reviewed my notes. A couple things, and thank you, Jim, for your comments. I agree with what you were saying. I believe this was asked and answered. I don't remember the answer about to what degree the agency has to use as a floor the proposed CPUC NBT, whether it is indeed a floor. I understand that the agency does have the authority to do something additional, but clarification whether or not it's a floor or we can do something additional. Also, because I agree with Jim that I think that we can do something innovative for our customers with this. And also, while this maybe this is a little bit too tangential. I mean, for the avoided cost calculation, like Jim was saying, there are a lot of people that have produced a lot of white papers vigorously disagreeing with the CPUC's figures. And I feel it would be helpful, maybe it's a little bit too tangential, to ask for someone like Loretta Lynch or one of the qualified advocates who have been disagreeing with the avoided cost calculation to do a presentation to us and to staff and the board on what they feel is a more realistic number. But again, if the NBT is a floor, it probably doesn't free us from it. But I think it would be good to hear from a professional about their experience with the avoided cost calculation.
Mute button. We'll take that into consideration. There's a kind of a process for that sort of request. So since the board isn't hearing this, I just really wanted to bring it back since we discussed it last time. It was not heard last time, and new information has come forth. So this will probably come back. If you have questions, if you're particularly interested in this, please reach out. I can send you the information that I have. Hopefully staff can provide us with some. CEO Chassett has there's a word that I'm not finding right now, assured us that staff are still under review, so they don't know what their recommendation is going to be yet, which could be part of the reason that it did not come back to this meeting. So we look forward to hearing what that recommendation is, hopefully with time enough to be responsive to if the board is hoping to go in a different direction. All right, do we have any further discussion on this, or can we go into the most meaty one?
Member Landry has her hand raised.
Great, thank you. Member Landry?
Yes, I agree with the comments from Commissioner Pacheco, and I would like to see a more definitive report coming back next month. This is a major change in reimbursement, and there is opposition from the community, and I would like to be in a position to make a more I would like to be able to hear both sides more clearly. And I like the idea of a presentation that you mentioned from perhaps Loretta Lynch or someone else that is very familiar with this. We do need as much renewable and solar energy as we possibly can get. And I heard today that the farmers in the Central Valley, they're gonna have to change the way they do their farming. So, we really have to look at renewable energy, and I would like to see the financial incentive continue. But again, I would need more information, and hopefully the staff next month can come back with a report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Landry. I only have my camera off because I'm hoping that it makes the signal just a little bit stronger here. Member Souza?
Oh, hi, everybody. One of the things that just seems like it occurs to me that I don't know how much Ava Energy will be able to, what they'll be able to do at this point. I think that the PUC has totally failed the public in accepting the NEM3, or what they're calling it today. And yet at the same time, I think, maybe Ava can can do something about it, sorry about the background, by helping with batteries or something along those lines so that we could move off of, move off of the reliance on the grid during the evening hours. So I'm just putting that out there. I don't know what to do about the PUC. They're just, it seems like they're bought and paid. It doesn't seem that they're working in the right direction, especially when we're having record heat waves and obviously the climate is failing us. So we need to really do something. We need to put our foot down and say, you guys need to do something. But anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Now I'm looking a bit at time, and is there further discussion on this item? All right, seeing none. I almost thank staff for the presentation, but there wasn't one. So we will move on to the emissions overview, which is informational item. I believe that Katie will be presenting this. Is that correct? No, that might be wrong. Who's presenting this?
Izzy, my name is Izzy.
Izzy, you're in there. I didn't see your name on the list. Hi. All right.
All right, hello everyone. You can hear me okay out there. My name is Izzy, and I'm on the Power Resources team at EBCE. This presentation was originally put together in April of this year in response to additional information on Bright Choice emissions. So it is an informational item. Go to the next slide, please. We will go through EBC products and what contributes to emissions. For those products, we'll talk through some of the Bright Choice history, several changes that happened in 2020 impacting emissions reporting and procurement, and finally where we are now, including a comparison against other CCAs. Again, emissions specific to Bright Choice is the running theme through all the slides. So that's for help. So what is the power content label? So we'll start. Power content label is an annual requirement to disclose the mix of sources used to provide electricity. It resembles a nutrition label for electricity. It's reviewed and approved by the CEC along with the power source disclosure data, which is the underlying data that this power content is pulled from. It shows us what types of energy we pay for, both through direct and indirect transactions. So an example of a direct transaction is when we get electricity from, say, a solar resource at a long-term PPA, or it could be also from a short-term transaction, like a specific hybrid generator. An example of an indirect transaction is when we buy electricity through the CAISO market. That shows up on our power content label as unspecified sources of power, and you'll see that here as a row under the Bright Choice column, 28.4% for 2022. And since we don't know exactly what generator or generators that energy comes from, it's assigned what's intended to be reflective of the average emissions level on the electric system. One thing I want to note is that the significant reporting lag. So here we are in October 2023. We just finalized the 2022 power content label data a few weeks ago, early October. So there's quite a lag on this information being available. I also want to make the distinction between the power content label and RPS. RPS compliance is a multi-year compliance, and power content label again is an annual requirement. Next slide. These are EBCE's two current customer products, Renewable 100, which is 100% renewable energy, solar wind resources, and then our Bright Choice product, which is our basic plan, costs a little bit less than PG&E. what we're looking at here is basically a visual representation of the data that was on the previous slide. So again, we have the 50% solar and wind for renewable 100, and for the right choice, it's a little over 49% renewables, just under 22% hydro, and then that gray portion of the pie that you see there is the unspecified power. Again, unspecified power is not traceable to a specific generating facility. It's typically a mix of all resources. It could include renewables, but I like to think about it as kind of what's used for balancing. So it's basically the difference between what we have prepared on behalf of our right choice customers and what's actually needed to serve their retail load. So if we were to create these visuals based on the power content label over the next several years towards our 2030 goal, what you see is that gray unspecified portion of the pie getting smaller and smaller, and the renewables and hydro portion getting larger and larger. And so this is a most recent example. So when this was originally prepared in April, we just had the 2021 power content label, and that gray portion on the left there was at 40%. The one that we're just finalized a few weeks ago for 2022 has us at 28.4%. So you can see that we're already very much in line with the trajectory towards that 2030 goal, actually ahead of what was originally contemplated. So there was some other text on this slide. I'm not sure why it's not showing up there. Hopefully you guys can see it on the other deck.
No.
Okay. Well, renewable energy credits, or RECs, are classified in
The one that was posted earlier today is missing.
It's missing it also, okay. Okay. I can keep going and move forward.
Try one more. Is there one more?
There we go. All right, so renewable energy credits, or RECs, represent the clean energy attributes of renewable electricity. One REC is equivalent to 1 megawatt hour of renewable electricity that's generated, and a REC is really the certificate that's created when that energy is generated. So they are classified into 3 distinct categories. They're called portfolio content categories, or PCCs. PCC1 is considered a bundled product. These are from renewable resources where the energy and the REC are delivered at the same time. An example of this would be like our Altamont wind facility is right here in Alameda. PCC2s also come from renewable resources, but they're generated out of state. The energy is used locally, and then the REC is bundled with substitute energy, not from that same resource, but it could also be renewables, and then delivered at the same time. So an example of this would be maybe a wind resource in Oregon where that energy is used locally. And then PCC3, which is considered an unbundled product because the REC doesn't have any of the underlying energy attached to the product.
Izzy, can I ask you a quick question on that slide?
Sure.
Great, so you just said the PCC2 is from a renewable resource. We use that energy, but it's like attached to something that isn't the same source. So, and that thing that it's bundled to could be renewable, but what is the percentage chance that it is renewable? I mean, it could also be gas, right?
Yeah, it could be a number of different resources. The original power is definitely from a renewable resource. So like in my example, wind resource in Oregon where that energy is used locally that represent bundled with substitute energy, and that substitute energy is again not from that same source as the rest, but it could be renewable. I don't know what the percentage, or if there's a way to tell what the percentage.
Is it, so is that thing that it's bundled with just grid energy?
I believe so. Jim may know the answer to this too, if he's on the line.
Yeah, I could speak this one a bit. That's a safe way of putting it. So when you think about energy, you know, one person usually has a right to claim an attribute. And so the grid energy may be specific to a source. It may be ACS, it may be Chelan, a hydro source, but we don't have a right to claim the right to title to that attribute. But definitely the emission intensity of the bundled power could change just depending on the economics and the source of the power that backs the PCC2 REC.
Yeah, the thing that I'm just trying to clarify for folks is that it's being bundled with energy, but really that energy is just coming from the grid, right?
That's a fair way of putting it.
Okay, so it would have, so it's just grid energy, which is the unspecified stuff. Okay, great. Keep going.
Chair Eldred, Member Pacheco.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't hear all the words that were being said by Jim.
Yeah.
Jim. So I may be repeating the question. I had thought that both 1 and 2 RECs came with a knowledge of where they're coming from, and only type 3 RECs were unknown. So is the answer to that type 2, REC 1, type 1 RECs, we know where they're theoretically coming from. Is REC 2 unknown?
We do know the resources that those certificates are coming from. It's the energy part that's substituted.
Okay, they're like Oregon.
Right.
So they put the energy on in Oregon, we're pulling the energy off now.
We know by accounting anyway that REC 2 are supposedly, we know how many renewable energy RECs we are theoretically by bureaucracy.
By information resources, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's the clarification I was looking for. And so sorry, this follow-up question. So are all our 2 type RECs from renewable energy, or are we also?
Yeah, all of them, yes, yeah. Our PCC2 RECs are recognized under the RPS program as renewables. They're by and large solar, wind, and hydro, geothermal, biomass. They're definitely all renewable resources, yes.
The CEC doesn't let us count that.
Right.
Okay, so a little bit about Bright Trace history. So 2018 was the first Bright Trace came about. That was created to provide electricity to customers at a lower price than PG&E as a comparable product. In October of 2018, the board approved use of climate registry or carbon accounting methodology. Climate registry is a nonprofit. National emissions accounting methodology is widely used by load-serving entities, including California, IOUs, states, and cities. And it's actually largely continued use outside of California. In 2019, PG&E initiated a formal large hydro and nuclear allocation process. It was determined by load share. Acceptance has zero cost to CCAs, and PDC initiated several discussions on whether you should take the nuclear allocation specifically, starting with November 19 executive committee meeting. That was followed by extensive discussions on risk, benefits, costs with both the board and the CAC at December 2019 and January 2020 board and CAC meetings. There's actually a memo that was put together following those meetings and answering all of the questions that came up over the course of those several meetings as well. It really was a fundamental question that came down to a trade-off between having nuclear and lower greenhouse gas emissions or not having nuclear and accepting higher greenhouse gas emissions.
I don't necessarily, my point of view, agree with that analogy. Just yet.
I'm supporting you.
Yeah, I don't agree with it because large hydro does not mean higher greenhouse gas emissions.
Right, so the point at the bottom is really specific to nuclear. So it's the trade-off between accepting the nuclear and having lower greenhouse gas. Accepting or not accepting the nuclears. It's not specific to the hydro. The hydro is carbon free, right?
We can go again back over the details of that discussion. We do remember the presentation. We were assured that it was very small, that we would never actually have the power, that all of those things, but you can continue with the presentation on that.
Okay. So ultimately the board elected to accept the large hydro allocation at that time and reject the nuclear allocation. And with the introduction of that carbon-free allocation, the focus shifted to renewable energy. The right choice target was amended at that time to include a clean energy procurement floor based on PG&E's prior year renewable energy and power content forecast, plus a 5% buffer to account for any uncertainty. So that percentage buffer was determined by looking at prior year's renewable energy power content forecast for PG&E. And based on that analysis, a 5% buffer was included to account for that variability. When it came to light that there were forecasting challenges that existed under that approach due to lack of visibility into PG&E's annual renewables targets and also their changing RPS banking strategy. Also the significant reporting lag posed an additional challenge. As I mentioned, so we're here in October of 23 and we're just getting the 2022 power content label data. So values are not fully validated until the fall of the year following the power procurement. So while that 5% buffer might have been sufficient to account for difference in forecast in previous years, that particular year in 2021, it landed EDC's renewable percentage a little bit lower than PG&E. Assembly Bill 1110 modified the power content reporting methodology and emissions accounting methodology that was implemented in 2020. Again, at that time, EDCE was using the climate registry, which was a widely accepted national emissions accounting registry accounting methodology. And this Assembly Bill required replacing the climate registry, which is kind of a global methodology, to a California-specific methodology. So a few slides back, we were talking about PCC2s, and EDC purchases a portion of their renewables at these PCC2 RECs. Again, this is a renewable product used and counted as renewable under the RPS program, largely with solar, wind, and hydro resources, but they are generated outside of California. So there's clean energy being generated, there's emissions being reduced. It's just that those emissions are being reduced in another state outside of California, and because of that, under the California-specific methodology that this Assembly Bill requires that we use, the new accounting adds an emission factor for these resources that's equivalent to unspecified system power. Again, unspecified system power is assigned an emissions factor that's meant to be reflective of the average emissions level on the grid. So where are we now? December 2020, the board adopted a clean energy goal for EDC's portfolio to have zero net emissions by 2030. And in April of last year, of 2022, a path to reach that zero emissions goal was approved. It included annual targets for renewable large hydro. And 2 months later, in June of last year, those targets for 2022 and 2023 were increased by an additional 5%. This past June, just a few months ago, the 2023 and 2024 targets were again increased by an additional 5% and 10% respectively. I know this slide is very wordy, but it's really just meant to highlight kind of the progress and acceleration that we are moving towards our path to 2030. So this table probably looks a little familiar to many of you. Couple things here. So the 18 through 2021, that kind of grayed out area on the top are actuals. 2022 through 2030 are the approved numbers that were on the table in the 2022, April 2022 last year. I did not include the actual in the table there, but it is included in the box just above the table, and I did that intentionally so that you could see the progress that we've made in just that year. So you see the original target was at 45% for renewables. We ended at just under 50%. The original target was at 63% carbon free. We ended at over 71%. And the target was at 37% unspecified, and we landed at just over 28%. And again, the targets for 23 and 24 in that box above. I really just want to highlight the carbon free, that 76%, and the unspecified target of 24, and then for 2024, the 81%. If you find those values on the table below, where it was contemplated is for 2025 and 2026. So we're a couple of years ahead of what was contemplated originally when this was approved in April of last year. On the bottom, below the table, is our emissions factor for 2022 that came out of Council Label October. You can see it's well below what was originally anticipated. There was a question that came up at the board meeting last month that asked if we were still using the climate registry, what the emissions factor would be, and then also what portion of the emissions of that 496 was attributed to PCC2s. So that breakdown is here. About 272 for the climate registry and about 224 for PCC2s. So overview is really focused on right choice, but it's important also to know that EDC's total emissions includes our R100 product also. There was also a similar question at the board meeting last month to say what our weighted emissions were between the two products and what portion would be attributed to PCC2s, and again, what our emissions factor would be if we were allowed to use that climate registry methodology, and so I've got that on the bottom there as well. One thing I want to note on the left is specific to our R100 load. This really just speaks to the success of promoting and signing people up for this product. In 2021, the R100 load was at 97,000, just over 97,000, and in 2022 it was close to 14 times greater than that. So again, this speaks to the success of promoting that product. See the increase there. And I know this is generally about right choice, so there's not too much discussion on R100, but I thought that was important to highlight. And then here we have the CCA comparison slide. The questions came up most recently, I think, at the March board retreat, asking how EDC compared to other CCAs, both on power content, on emissions, on rates. And so this table kind of puts all those together. This is an update to what was presented previously. Obviously, we have the 2022 data here. On the right, there's some contributing factors to emissions. So acceptance or rejection of nuclear allocation, renewable and hydro content, unspecified power. Those are all things that contribute to higher or lower emissions. This table also shows rates as they're compared to PG&E, PG&E's current rates for 2023. You'll see that the table is organized by renewable content by RPS. You'll see that EDCP is highlighted there as green. There are 5 CCAs with higher renewable content than EDC. You can see the 3 directly above us are very close in number. There really are 2, the PowerSec and MCE, that have meaningfully higher renewable content than we do. Yes, one other thing to note is related to the renewable under the last slide. This also came up at the last board meeting. what percentage of our renewable content, I'm sorry, what percentage of our load was R100 versus right choice. So this table is specific to the base product for each of these CCAs. But you look at the R100 equivalent for those two CCAs that have a higher content for us here, EVC's load is 6 times greater than either of them, and closer to 6.5 times greater actually. Couple other things to note here. All 5 of the CCAs with the higher content also have higher rates than EVCE. And if you're looking at the table as a whole, EVCE is the only CCA of any of those listed that actually reduced rates this year. I guess that's pretty much it. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So we're gonna first go to public comment. And I'm sure we're gonna want to put that slide back up, but why don't we go first to members of the public with their hand raised?
Thank you. Audrey Ichinose, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. One was, one concerned our resource adequacy requirement. Are there any specifics attached to that requirement that are related to clean energy? Or are we just have to make sure we have that RA and it doesn't matter whether it's green or not? That's one question. The second question was that, you know, the offer of nuclear power was related to the PCIA, wasn't it? And in a way, it's really important to note that context, that connection. I think I may be totally wrong. It's all of this is very confusing, can be very confusing. And then I understand that there is a drawback to large hydro in terms of it being less clean than other sources of clean energy. And that doesn't have to do with, you know, water supply. So those were 3 questions that I had that, you know, really I would love to see clarified. Thanks very much.
Chair, would you like to go to the next public comment, or?
Izzy, do you have a quick answer for any of that?
Yeah. Well, so the first question, it was related to RA. This informational session is actually completely different than RA. We do have separate compliance requirements for RA. But none of those have been touched in this presentation at all. I'm not probably the best person to speak to those.
Okay.
The second question was related to the nuclear allocation in PCIA. So acceptance of the nuclear or the large hydro allocation has zero incremental cost to CCA. So the PCIA is a non-bypassable charge that all customers pay, regardless of, you know, whether we accepted or didn't accept either of those allocations, or it's completely separate and all customers pay that. So there's no impact in terms of cost to the CCAs based on PCIA. And then the third question, I think maybe referring to ACS. So there are 2 different types of, so ACS or asset control suppliers are basically suppliers that have a fleet of generation. They could have wind or nuclear or gas, and they have these contracts for large hydro, but that power is variable, so it's not around the clock, and might back it up with burn power from other resources. And so there may be a very small portion of the delivery that is from another source. And that may be what the question is referring to. And that's the only distinction that comes to mind between large hydro being less clean. I don't know if that answers the question. Or Jim, if you want to add any additional color there?
Yeah, I could speak to a little bit. First off, fantastic questions. I love those. They're very thoughtful. I'm just going to fill in some gaps on what Izzy said. There, we do have an RA resource adequacy compliance requirement that's a bulk amount of available megawatts that can be called upon when there's a need for them for grid reliability. The newest flavor of resource adequacy is something that's called the near-term reliability and the midterm reliability requirement. It's NTR and MTR for short. And those require new capacity to be built by load-serving entities. And those requirements actually carry some qualifiers that it has to be a certain amount of low carbon or renewable or kind of a level of dispatch. And so they're actually changing the resource adequacy rules a bit to make the resources that those serving entities are required to procure to be more dynamic and be cleaner. So I think that's a very good question. But the old resource adequacy paradigm didn't include any kind of renewable or clean qualifier. Part two, sorry, Anna Olivia, did you have a follow-up to that?
No. I was just saying, gosh, that's helpful. I didn't realize I wasn't off of mute. That was a great answer.
Yeah, the next one, which Izzy kind of answered, is correct. There's no incremental charge to be accepting the nuclear as large hydro, but as Audrey pointed out, the link between them exists. And what we tell people is you are already paying through your PCIA for this allocation. And so by all of our customers paying into the PCIA, they have a right to a pro rata share of both the nuclear and the carbon-free that's part of PG&E's portfolio. And so they are linked conceptually that our customers are already paying for that. We just have to choose to accept it.
All right, we can go to the next comment.
I just want to also recognize that Vice Chair Hernandez has joined us. I see also that Member Pacheco has his hand raised. Would you like to go to the next comment or recognize Member Pacheco's comment?
No, we should finish public comment before we go to, yeah.
Right, Local Clean Energy Alliance, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Hey, this is Jessica Tovar with East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I want to just kind of take to like the whole point of community choice energy. And that is to provide more renewable energy to to the constituents that it serves. So first and foremost, we really felt like taking nuclear energy or taking hydro renewables a bait and switch. And it's really disturbing to see EVCE really use that line to say that because we didn't take the nuclear, we're not clean or as clean as we could be. When the reality is nuclear energy is not clean. And I'm speaking as an environmental justice organizer and person who's grown up in an environmental justice community. So that I want to name. I also want to name is I remember all the dates of those meetings, and actually some of your dates are wrong. There's several dates in that year of 2020 where this thing came up over and over again. And the community was adamant that they didn't want to take it, even though we're forced to pay in the PCIA for Diablo Canyon. The truth is we're forced to pay by corporate utilities for all the infrastructure, sources, assets of dirty energy all the time. It doesn't mean that it's okay. Third thing I want to say is we opposed it because we knew that if community choice programs were to take that nuclear, you're justifying the extension of a life of a power plant that is being pushed to the limits outside of its lifetime. That is what's wrong with our energy system, is that communities who live by dirty power plants or power plants that pose such risks like nuclear energy is that we have to live in fear day to day of what kind of incidents could take place that affect both the workers and the fence line community. There's a lot of reasons not to take nuclear energy. I can be here all day and hold a workshop for you. But what I will say is to hear our local community choice program throw this whole thing under the bus and say it's because we didn't take nuclear is really false. It's really false. And it's to me, it's very dirty. I saw the documents that said if a community choice program chose to take that nuclear allocation, then they can pay. It literally says in the documents, then they can proceed with payment for that. So it wasn't free. There was an exchange of money, but I want to just uplift. I don't care how much it costs. I don't care if it's free. I don't care if somebody paid for us to take it. We can't be continually exacerbating environmental racism.
Thank you.
That's the point of a community choice program.
Thank you. There's no further public comment.
Thank you. We'll go, so I would love to do a stack here. Member Pacheco was first. Who else has questions or comments on this topic? You can physically raise your hand or raise your hand online. So is that Member Landry?
Yes.
Jim, I can't see as far as you are, so if your hand is raised or Vice Chair Hernandez, are you in there?
Mine wasn't, but Ed was.
It's what? Okay, great. Are there any other members online who have questions? I just want to do a stack here.
There are no hands raised.
Great. All right. Then we'll start with Member Pacheco.
A couple of clarifying questions. So in 2020, so 2022 is the most recent data, which is what you pulled up. Wasn't there, you probably said this, I was reading and listening at the same time. Weren't there more than 13 CCA programs at the time? Was there, or was, why these 13 programs on the chart not, I believe there was more than 13 in 2022, was there?
There are statewide, there are definitely more than 13. Those are kind of the largest and
Well, these are the largest?
Yeah.
So that's okay, so that.
There are some smaller ones for sure, and there may be newer ones coming on. But
Oh, okay, I think you did say that, I missed that. And then, so I mean, looking at this chart, which I'm just looking at, seeing now, thank you, it's interesting is, so I know nuclear is a factor why our emissions are higher than some CCAs, but looking at the 5 that have lower, well, that's more than 5 that have lower emissions than us, it doesn't seem like nuclear is that big of an issue, and that they managed to have significantly lower rates while also not taking the nuclear allocation. And you may not have an answer to this off the top of your head. Was this just like during the rounds of contracts for PPAs at the time, they had a better tranche to pick from? Or why do we have 5 CCAs that have significantly larger emissions that also didn't take nuclear allocation? And I see our price differential is like 1/10 of 1%, 1/10 of 1%. Was it the 1/10 of 1% price differential, which was like the or significant factor, or was it just like what PPAs were out there at the time?
I mean, it's probably a combination of factors. I don't think you could say it's really one over anything else. I think that of the ones that are, can you actually bring that slide up the I believe that in 2022, it's the same 8 CCAs that have lower emissions compared to last year, and of those 3, the same 3 exempted the nuclear allocation. So Silicon Valley, San Jose, and Pioneer are the 3 that have the nuclear in the same year as compared to the previous presentation. There are, basically looking at the 5 above us, you're right, 3 of those have higher rates. But yeah, I think there's a number of factors. Some of them have been around quite a long time. You know, some of them have different demographics, different load serving. So, Clean Power Set, for example, compared to UCE, is close to half of the load that we serve. So there's definitely factors as well. I don't think you can really attribute it to just one thing. Some of it's race, some of it could be nuclear, some of it could be demographics, length of time in existence, could be access to facilities.
Okay, well, thank you. So I still am curious, and then again, I mean, I don't know how you dig up the numbers or do the analysis, but I am, so there's a price differential of 1% plus or minus 1/2 or 1%. It looks like on these 13 largest CCAs. And like MCE's been around longer, so they had more credit, better credit and whatnot. So I know some of this has to do with what's available at the time, but it really does look, first of all, thank you for this chart. This is actually helpful. This is actually helpful for thinking about this. I am struck by, I think what Jessica Tovar was also saying, that nuclear does not seem to be anywhere near as significant an issue on why our emissions are so much higher than some others than I had thought. This actually helps to clarify that nuclear was not that big of an issue, at least for the 13 largest CCAs. And I some projections looking forward sound good. There's been a lot of community discussion and CCA discussion about why our emissions so high compared to others. And I, even as a CAC member, haven't had a clear idea on that, and have been trying to understand that. This is helpful, and one of the ways it's helpful is showing me that nuclear allocation wasn't that important. And I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Member Pacheco. Member Landry?
Yes, if you could keep that chart up, Adrian, on the CCA comparison. Would you remind me, the last column here, 2022 pounds, this last column, what does that represent again? What is that?
That's actually our emissions number. So that's a CO2 equivalent per megawatt. It's called, that's what our emissions level is for the year. It's the.
And then what I noticed, is that, we're at 496. And, there are, only 3 out of where we have at least 10 were like fourth from the bottom. Am I reading this correctly on the emissions? I see King City with more, 3 CE and Valley.
Yeah.
So that's our. It seems pretty high. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I'm just saying it seems high.
I mean, if we go back to the table, it's actually significantly lower than where was contemplated to be for this year. The targets have been accelerated twice. Can we do better? Sure. We'll continue to move in the right direction. But our path to 2030 was outlined in April of last year, and we're definitely on track and even, moving faster towards that target than what was approved.
Member Landry, does that cover it for you?
Yes.
Okay, great. Member Hernandez?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. And personally, I didn't meet you in person after many presentations. So Izzy, right?
Izzy, yes.
Yes, thank you. That's okay. I'll call you that. And I've noticed, I was listening online, are there microphones in the room, or is it just sound that carries to the screen? Is that what that
sound that carries to the screen?
Yeah, maybe we want to have little desk mics in the future so that it picks up better the sound, because we have half or more than half people online, and we have that echo that falls through. For my comments, this is always when I come to the session, it's like a graduate level course on energy. It's very difficult. I feel like I'm going back to college, and we are in the East Bay here at the university. When I look at this previous slide around Renewable 100, the big jump you mentioned, and I don't know if we can quantify the big delta I know 2022, is that when everybody opted in? Is that, you're saying that what happened last in 2022?
Yeah, there's some significant opt-ins in 2022 as compared to 2021. Those are not customer counts, that's actually low, so it's quite a bit higher in that year.
And then is that the same year that Brilliant 100 got cut off, or is that right? Or Brilliant 100, we had that before. Is that around the same time? Because that would have been a shift too, because you would shift over to Renewal 100, and then you had 3 products, we shifted to 2, I believe. Is that the year that happened? Maybe that was part of just had the right story, I guess. It's just trying to.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to remember when that product was closed.
Yeah.
I believe it was 21.
And then the jump to 22.
I believe so.
And then I always, when I was on the board, I went to go toward Diablo Canyon. It's an interesting facility. They were doing a lot of work to keep it going through the process of shutting it down. We know that the governor accepted it. And another consultant that we had for the city of San Leandro that I represented talked about Diablo Canyon's lifespan. So I didn't really think about the lifespan of the facility. Saying some of them last maybe 20, 40 years, and newer ones might last 40, 60 years. This was built in 1985, so we're almost hitting those 40 years or so. So I guess there are still concerns about that facility. And knowing that we discussed and I voted on rejecting the nuclear energy on behalf of the city of San Leandro as one of your member organizations. So there was robust conversation. So it was interesting. We got a lot of data. Also, we chose to reject the allocation so we could be clean and nuclear free. What I'm seeing in the next slide on the CCA, I think it speaks to the importance of us procuring our own energy, which is good. With that roadmap that the board has set forth by 2030 to be 100% carbon free. So do you really see the deltas? Because we're at what, 49.4 RPS renewable electricity to like clean power, MCE almost at 60. So we're 50, they're 60. And then hydro, we're 21 to their 37. And you see that we have more unspecified. So we're paying a premium for the unspecified because it's not really what we procured. It's more what we're getting off the market. Is that how? And maybe that's why we don't have as much of a cost savings, maybe, or differential, or we're having more load of carbon emissions. Is that where you see that big delta sometimes when we don't procure our own energy, clean energy contracts? We take it from the grid, and then we have all that. Who knows what's in there?
I mean, when you say pay a premium, you mean pay a premium with emissions?
Pay financial premium sometimes off the market because we're not have our own contracts. Is that how that works?
I mean, certainly the PCC ones are much higher cost, and those have no emissions. So it's less expensive to get these PCCs, and with those come the emissions hit.
Is that the ones we're getting more unspecified PCC2s? I was walking in when you were going over that.
Yeah.
And then we're working towards reducing our carbon emissions over years because we'll be more clean or carbon free.
Right. So if you look at that chart, the unspecified portion is really just the difference between 100% and what the carbon free target is. And so over time, that gray portion of the pie is getting smaller and smaller. And with that, the PCC2s is also going down. So by the time that we get to the 2030 goal, there will be 0 PCC2s and 0 unspecified power. So we'll be at 100% carbon.
And do you see our generation rate there also be lower? That you have here at 13.42 versus like other entities at 12, like Pioneer, they have a lot more nuclear. So it's interesting. I mean, would you see us be a lower generation rate then?
That I have no idea.
Well, I'm kind of Howard about that. He has all the numbers. Okay, thank you. Just asking for clarification. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
I do have a question now.
All right, member, let's go for it.
This is all based on net annual, not hourly. We were chatting before about hourly. An hourly would be more realistic of how much carbon is going in. Do you have, and I know we haven't figured it out, do you have a sense of how ABC is doing on the hourly emissions compared to others, or you haven't done that?
We don't have that data. In order for us to really have the hourly data, there are businesses that tracks all of our reps, they would need to have a timestamp on them, you know, they're just transferred as single right now, so there's no, we don't have that kind of visibility. It's not even that, we just haven't done the analysis, and we don't have visibility to do it yet. And so, it is, you know, we were talking about, it is something that's being contemplated right now. There are workshops happening currently. We are trying to evaluate feasibility and timing for that, but it's definitely, you know, it's not in place yet.
Okay. But it will be more honest in some sense.
Yes, yeah, it will definitely, yeah.
So we may see another upset in a couple of years, like we did when CC said, have to count regs for the PCC 2 as high as bidding, even though they weren't.
Yeah,
So
they're
we could see an upset like that coming when we shift over that hourly allocation.
Could be, yeah, it depends on where it all lands, but certainly it would show up on the power content label that that was that was direction.
That's it.
All right, I will say that this is the first time I've done this online, and it sounds like you all are in a big echoing bowl of soup, and it's really, really hard to understand. I know that we got microphones for the board meetings, so we should look at maybe having them hear. My complete compliments to all of you who did this online each time. I did not realize that the sound was so intermittent depending on the speaker. So are there other questions from folks online? I'd like other people to go before me if you have comments or questions. All right, Izzy, thank you so much. I am really, really grateful for this. We've been waiting a long time, and it's great to see the new numbers come up. If we can go back a few slides, where it talks about AB 110, I think was the name of it. Okay. All right. 1110, AB 1110. Note to self. So I just wanted to clarify something in here. So the way that emissions are counted changed. And before we were looking at what global emissions were, and now we're looking at what emissions in California are, right? So we used to say we have these bucket 2 RECs, which reduces emissions in Oregon, even though, but now we can only count emissions reductions in California. Is that a correct summary?
Yeah.
Great. So in the last thing, we learned that those, or earlier in your presentation, we learned that those RECs are bundled with power that is consumed locally, that is functionally more or less system power. Is that also correct?
For the PCC2s, is that right? Yeah, so the energy from those resources that are out of state is used locally, and then the certificate is then matched with substitute power.
Yeah.
Yes.
But by locally, you mean where they're actually made. So the power that what we're doing is actually measuring the power that we're doing. And the law says measure your emissions for what you're actually using, not just the credits that you buy from out-of-state power. So these numbers are our actual emissions. And if we want them lower, then we have to create new in-state renewables or drop consumption or something along those lines. Okay, that makes sense to me. Because bucket 2 RECs are not reducing emissions locally. All right, so if we can go forward to the one that shows this was just so you know, the slide was confusing. It was hard to figure out what was actually happening in there. Nope, you're going way too far forward, go back. Here, nope, no, go forward. Where are we going? Back to the charts, if you could. We were on the one that, okay, so I found this one confusing. Oh, so this is where we increase the targets. So these are our new targets, right?
Yeah, so this was just showing the progression of the targets essentially, yeah, so.
Okay, so we said, we're gonna do this better than we had initially planned. The board said, try and get there by this date. This was our path, and we said, we can do it faster because our staff are amazing. Okay, cool, because they are. Go to the next slide. So here, 2022, we said we would be at 45%. We're actually at 49.4%. Carbon free, 71.4%. Unspecified, we're down to 28.4. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we are slaying it on our targets. We are doing much better than the path that we laid out to get to an acceptable outcome, which was 100% carbon free and 75% renewable by 2030.
Yes.
Great. Okay, next slide. So here, I think this is where we start getting into the comments that I frequently receive from members of the public, and a lot of the comment that has been made is the concern around this 38.2. What did you choose to go with PSDR emission factor as opposed to carbon dioxide equivalents per megawatt hour for the naming of that chart? Unless I'm misunderstanding what PSDR emission factor is. Will you define that term for me?
Yeah, they're actually the same. So if you go back to the other one, the carbon dioxide equivalence is the same as the emission factor. The only distinction here is that the PSDR emission factor is what's required under the shift in 2020. And then the climate registry is just intended to show the jump based on the emissions that have to be counted for these C2s.
Okay, but this is
that PSDR column is the same as that CO2 equivalent column that's in the other table.
okay. And total emissions including renewable 100 product. Here it says that we're at 450. And underneath it says 382. So can you explain that difference?
Yeah, so again, the table is just showing our the approved target, and that was from the April 2022. So those are not actuals. That was what the
Oh, and so our actual is 382 as opposed to our projected 450.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, just so you know, that was not clear. Okay, cool. And it might just be the sound, but that I didn't get that. Good job being better than that. That's great. All right, so the next slide here. Okay, so to Cynthia's point, if you were to organize this chart by CO2 emissions, and Cynthia, you will not be the only one who doesn't know this if you don't know it. Do you know what that thing under 2022 pounds CO2e/MWH means? Member Landry?
Well,
are you familiar with this term CO2e MWH?
Clarify
on the slide.
Okay. So if emissions from energy production don't electricity generation aren't all actually carbon dioxide emissions, sometimes they're other forms. And so the way that the intensity of those all different kinds of emissions are measured is it would be how much of this or how much CO2 is equivalent to that as far as like, environmental cost goes. Really crudely stated, per megawatt hour of electricity that we're producing. So if you were to turn everything into like the emissions, we're going to turn it all into carbon dioxide. This is that equivalent. It's a way to compare apples to apples as opposed to other things, right? So and I think this, like Tom Kelly speaks a lot about this, and this is his concern, and it's a very, very valid concern. I am, how did we get to 496 again? Oh, is this just the base product?
Yes.
Okay, so 382 is the weighted, 496 is the base product. Okay, it would be interesting, and are these all the other utilities-based products as well?
Just PG&E is shown on there.
Okay, and then the other ones, are we comparing ourselves against their base products, or are we comparing against their combined?
We're not comparing ourselves against the other two utilities.
No, the CCA.
Oh, the CCAs?
Yeah.
I may have misunderstood your question.
So like Redwood Coast, are we looking at their default product? Are we looking at their only product? Or are we
Oh,
looking
yes,
at
sorry. They're all of this chart in its entirety is the base product for each of the CCAs as well as PG&E.
Okay, so it would be interesting to see this chart again as a combined chart for like what our utilities actual output is. So we would be we'd be fourth from the bottom if you did it by this CO2 equivalence, but if you did it by cost savings, we'd be really near the top, which is the entire reason that that legislation was passed, so that we could provide cost savings to our customers and make independent choices about our energy sources. And some of my comments on here were already made. I do really just want to say how impressive it is that we do have the cost savings, but also will echo Member Pacheco saying that like if we look at Silicon Valley, which is actually really pretty close to us in some ways, that except they have 24.3% nuclear, their emissions factor are lower, but their cost is way higher. So that's not, I also don't see the nuclear thing being a very big deal here. I do want to remind, Izzy, I don't know if you know this, but in December of 2020, after staff came and said, we told you that emissions would go up and it would be more expensive if we didn't take the nuclear. The board did vote to take it and sell it because that was the idea, that we wouldn't take the nuclear energy. We would take the allocation and then we would sell it on the market. But we were not able to sell that energy because there was no market. There was no demand for it. So we did try that and it didn't work. So I am also disturbed that staff seem to routinely be going back to a decision that was made. Then we tried it the other way and it wasn't successful. And people are still pointing at that first decision. And I'm a little concerned by that. So I don't know if that's new information for you, but I would be happy to go over the history of this from our perspective, because that part did not feel like an accurate representation of the history of this very, very volatile topic, or even a history of the actual board's decision. So that's part there. Then we had something that looked at the projections, like where we're gonna be. Can we go to that slide?
This is one here.
Okay, great. So this is great. I just really want to point out that this is fantastic. We are looking at being over 80% carbon free by 2026, 90% by 2028, and at 75% renewables. And since we are already on this updated, like we have achieved more than we said we were going to. We're already past the 2024 numbers in 2022. I just want to say, I think this is really great, and highlighting how well staff is doing on this, as opposed to pointing at this other weird stuff. Like it doesn't feel right when that keeps happening. So this is a great slide, and if this were the focus, I think that we would have a happier public and a greater understanding of all the strides that we really are making. So that is all I have on that. If there are any other members who would like to comment.
Member Landry and Member Pacheco have their hands raised.
Excellent. And I am going to turn this over to Vice Chair Hernandez for just a moment, because I need to grab my power charger from the car or my computer will die.
He just left the room.
All right, then I will remain here until he comes back from the room.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to, I know that cost, back again to that CCA comparison, cost differential with PG&E, and again, I'm referencing East Bay Community Energy. Yes, the minus 5.8 is impressive, but I would say, and all due respect, cost savings at what long-term cost? So, so I think that yes, we do want to offer cleaner energy, but excuse me, we do want to offer reasonable prices, but we have to be also cognizant of the emissions. And then my other question is, if this were 2023, and I don't know if you've already went over this, what would you estimate? Obviously, it would not be 496. Would it be, I heard something, 382 or something. Would it be lower?
It would most certainly be lower. We don't have our, you're not done yet either, but fortunately that data won't be available until next, finalized anyway, until next October. I do have some very rough numbers. I think it will be right around 400. But again, the year's not over yet, so it's hard to say with certainty.
So we are making progress in reducing that number. All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Izzy. I seeing no further discussion on this topic. I'd like us to go. What?
Pacheco, staff.
Okay, go for it, Ernie. And then it's 7:40, so we're gonna wrap this up.
So like Chair Olivia was saying, yes, the projections moving forward do look good, and I appreciate the work the staff is doing on that. Understanding our past present emissions are important to us, and we haven't had clarity. This is helpful. We still don't have clarity. For me, this is something that I know has been talked about before, and I should have learned this 3 times. But so for the unspecified, are all our unspecified PCC 2X, or what percentage of the unspecified would you guesstimate are the PCC 2X?
So they're actually separate. So the unspecified PCC2s are assigned an emissions factor equivalent to unspecified power, but they're not the same.
Okay, thank you, I did not realize they were separate, so that's an addition, okay. And also, it says that they're all assigned the same emission factor, whether, in your presentation, it says solar, wind, or hydro, but it does also mean the same emission factor if it's NG, natural gas?
Yeah,
So-
unspecified power, it doesn't matter it could be solar or natural gas, they all, it's supposed to be reflective of an average of the grid, and so.
Okay, in 2020, I'd be interested in seeing is how much that was a spike in our emissions level, because all of a sudden we had to start including PCC2 RECs from hydro, wind, solar as natural gas emissions. Maybe that, I'm not sure, we don't have the information right here, but that seems like maybe that was part of why also we had that unexpected spike a couple years ago that shocked us all.
Yeah, that's definitely a part of on the table, there's a jump in between where the climate registry drops off and where the PSTR numbers increase, and it has to do, yes, with the Assembly bill that changed the reporting regulations. A portion of the unspecified also has to do with the drought. At that time, the water, we had great water in here this year, but in 2020, there's definitely a lot less hydro available, so that actually plays a part in it also, short drought. And so it's reimbursement as well.
So one follow-up question after you clarifying that the RECs are not in the unspecified 28% for 2022. So in this chart, which again is helpful, this is one of the most helpful charts I've seen, but I still have much questions. The PCC2 RECs are included as categorized under hydro or RPS?
Under RPS.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And hydro is just large hydro.
Okay, thank you.
All right, 7:43, I'm moving us on. This is a really important topic, this next one, and so I want JP to be able to have time for it. We are looking at the community innovation grants. And so JP, you are ready to go. When Member Hernandez comes back, will you let me know, Adrian?
I'm here.
Member Hernandez is having.
I was looking for coffee.
Okay, then I have to step away for half a second. I'm gonna call in on my phone so I can keep listening while I run to get my cable though.
We're not one of them. CAC doesn't get it.
Oh, I should just have it there, that's great for me to buy it.
All right. Standing Chair Hernandez, are we ready to go?
Yes, sir.
All right, Vice Chair, thank you very much. Okay, thanks all. This is JP Ross, Vice President, Local Development, and I wanted to talk about our plan to issue our first major round of community grants. And so, yeah, we'll talk through kind of what we've come up with. Adrian, if you want to go to the next slide, please. Great. So just a brief history. EDC has issued several rounds of grants in the past. Just as a backgrounder, we had our 2019 Community Innovation Grants. That was 6 grants of $40,000 a piece that we issued in 2019. We also provided about $2 million in COVID relief grants in the 2020-2021 timeframe when things were going crazy with the onset of the pandemic. And so we pulled together a bunch of money to provide out to the community during those trying times. We also did some 2022 community outreach grants that were around consumer education and enrollment in some of our low-income assistance programs like CARE and AMP. And then we also have some community sponsorships that we issue multiple times a year. Those are run through our marketing and account services team. They'll tend to be smaller grants on the order of $2,500 a piece. So that's a brief history of some of our grants. On to the next slide, please. So in last year's budget, the board approved funding about $5.2 million for community grants. We ended up increasing that by a bit to $5.6 million over 4 years. So about $1.4 million a year. During that process, board directed us to do kind of fewer larger grants, multi-year grants, to invest in community-based organization capacity building, and kind of longer term projects with CBOs through the grants. So if we think about kind of grants over a 3-year period at $100,000 a piece, so each grant would be around $300,000. That will allow for about 4 grants per year, 4 grants to be signed per year over each of the next 4 years. And then we were also received some direction around what are the boundaries of the grants that we would be providing, and worked through that the grants would be supporting EBCE's programs in some of the major areas that we've been focusing our efforts and that were part of the local development business plan. So transportation electrification, building electrification, community resilience, and energy efficiency. And then along kind of 3 categories of education and awareness, program enrollment, and workforce development. So those will be the main areas that we'll be focusing these grant solicitations on. Next slide, please. So what we'll plan to do is about 4 solicitations over the next 4 years, 2023, 24, 25, and 26. And those grant solicitations kind of line up here on the chart on the right. So we'll plan to issue these grant solicitations in cycles, where we'll do multiple grants at a time over these 4 funding cycles. And then the grants would, as indicated, last 3 years and be about $100,000 a year per grantee. We have issued kind of as a test run our first grant solicitation, and that was for education, induction, cooking, education, and awareness. We did that grant solicitation as a single grant, just to kind of get that moving and build the process. But our plan now is to kind of issue a grant cycle for multiple grants before the end of the calendar year. Next slide, please. So as part of this, we pulled together a community workshop, actually in the room where you all are now, or at least very close to that room, and brought in, had 30 participants in a hybrid meeting, and kind of folks broke out into workshops, and we asked folks to think about different grant ideas along these categories and proposed program areas. And now we've kind of come back with some proposed grants out of that workshop, and wanted to talk it through with you all. And these would be grants that we'd be trying, grant solicitation that we'd be trying to get out by the end of the year. Next slide, please. So we have 4 proposed grants that we would be planning to issue in the next couple of months, hopefully in November. The first would be a climate and renewable energy kind of education and awareness grant for primary and middle school, where we would be working with a CBO to develop and deliver educational materials and kind of solutions-oriented training for clean energy and on the clean energy transition, so that we could be delivering some positive climate ideas and solutions in younger educational environment and settings. The second would be a grant to promote community ownership of electric vehicle charging stations. So community ownership of assets was something that really came out clearly in the workshop. Since then, we have thought about that, and we reached out and talked with Tesla, who is actually willing to donate free level 2 chargers to community-based organizations for community ownership of charging stations. And Tesla actually has their level 2 chargers can charge either Tesla vehicles or the universal charger that works with all the other vehicles. So based on the preference of the community-based organization, Tesla is willing to ship either of their chargers and can ship multiple to a single location. So the grant would be to find a local community-based organization who can help reach out to other CBOs in the community who are interested in hosting level 2 charging stations and owning and hosting those level 2 charging stations to provide charging in their communities. And so we would be bringing in the free equipment from Tesla, and then EBCE's grant dollars could go to helping to fund the electrical work, the electrical installation work associated with that, installing that charger. And then the participating, CBO, like a church or a school, would then own those chargers and have the ability to provide that charging to their community. So the goal there would be to get up to 250 locally owned EV chargers throughout our communities. That's the second idea. The third idea, if we go to the next slide, Adrian, is working with the CBO to implement and accelerate a resilience hub community development plan. So we have allocated $2 million towards developing community resilience hubs, in addition to the critical municipal facilities resilience program that we've been working on for a couple of years now. So the grant here would be to basically work with the CBO to help convene local groups, local CBOs, on identifying how that $2 million program can best deliver resilience hubs to our customers and to our community. So that would be things like facilitating the identification of locations of community resilience hubs, how different community ownership models could be utilized in these resilience hubs, and also kind of identifying and providing grant writing services. There's a lot of funding available or will be available through the IRA and other channels. And so, how we can also bring in additional funding to build resilience hubs, and then work with us to kind of deploy that $2 million over the subsequent years so that we could develop some number of resilience hubs. 50 to 150 resilience hubs would be the goal, with the combination of this grant and the CBO that we'd be working with, as well as the $2 million allocation of program dollars that we have. And then the fourth grant idea is for kind of clean energy jobs. So we do have some workforce development grants that we're working on, kind of for apprentices and journeymen in the electrification trades. But this grant specifically would be around youth training for the energy transition. So we really need to be developing a lot of kind of pull from high school and younger secondary school education into the trades. And so this grant would be to work with local job training outfits in kind of high school and vocational training activities to increase interest in clean energy jobs and pull people into some of the training programs that are available, like Rising Sun, Cypress Mandela, CTWI, and others. And so those are the four kind of grant ideas in reviewing the outcomes and input from the community workshops, as well as working with staff within EBCE to kind of pulled together what we thought were 4 good grant opportunities to be issuing out. So we did provide some kind of notes on the outcomes and outputs from the breakout sessions in the community workshop that are on the next 4 pages. Folks can look at those, and what we did there was kind of bold the text that we felt was kind of pulled into these 4 grant ideas. A lot of kind of community ownership, education and awareness, and workforce development ideas came through from the community workshops. And so we're doing our best to kind of pull those into 4 different grant solicitation ideas that we thought kind of coalesce that, which is our proposal for issuing out in this first cycle. And then, we would plan to kind of pull together another group of grants in the new calendar year, once we have issued this solicitation and selected some partners, some community-based organizations that we can work with to implement these ideas.
Thank you, JP.
I am back, Member Hernandez, but if you don't mind continuing to chair for a moment, it would be helpful.
Sure, no worries. Questions from the public?
There are no, there is 1 hand raised for public comment, 2 hands raised. Local Clean Energy Alliance, you're recognized for 3 minutes. Hold on 1 second.
This is on behalf of East Bay Clean Power Alliance. My first thing is community innovation is supposed to be about organizations, creative ideas around and approaches and projects around energy. So that's the first thing. And I am noting that the way this is being pitched now sounds very prescriptive as opposed to open to community innovation. The second thing that I think is also something that should be improved should be access to these grants. So for example, the last grant that was put out on induction cooktops, pretty much was a very difficult application for small community-based organizations to apply to. And so it creates this dynamic of being dependent on these larger organizations that actually don't really need this kind of funding in the way that small organizations do. And so that's a problem right there, where I really think that we need to also offer smaller, more accessible grants that aren't so prescriptive, allow for organizations to be creative in their approach around energy. So I would like to see $50,000 grants also offered, in a 3-year commitment would also be great, so that they have the same opportunity of getting a longer term investment from the agency. The last thing too, I really want to see the ad hoc committee that came together like back in 2019, a mix of board members, a mix of community advisory committee people, taking applications, fielding the applications and making the grants to the organizations. I really hope that is the structure. We haven't talked about the structure of how those grants were made. And I just really think that the way it's been presented today is really more about marketing. And I think there should be a completely different budget for marketing programs for EBCE. I think community innovation is about community innovation and being open to that and supportive to that. And so I really hope that more money can be allocated to smaller organizations and that it be centered around community innovation, and that's more open than some of these more prescriptive programs. That's my time. I do have a lot more to say about this, so I will be following up. And I did mention last time around community, the climate innovation, People's Climate Innovation has been a great organization, disseminate a lot of the Justice 40 money. And if BCE needs help in that arena, they should reach out to me.
Thank you, Jessica. I think I'm hearing you say that you'd like to see more nimble, creative, and maybe smaller grants, and really understanding the process and procedures that this money might be marketed or evaluated. Like when I did the ad hoc committee as well, was in 2019. It was nice and nimble. So I think we have to look at innovative solutions to reach the community. And the question would be, how do we support staff, or how do we outreach to make sure organizations are out there able to receive this information and help apply for it, but not making it complicated or difficult to meet this opportunity to be innovative as well within these 4 or maybe more categories. I think we have another hand up.
Yes, Audrey Ichinose, recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I had the pleasure, it was really a great pleasure to participate in that workshop. So I was in one of the subgroups with 6 or so others, and I was really struck by how community-based organizations what your definition of community-based organizations was. And it struck me that it was very, it didn't kind of reach the level of organizations that exist in impacted communities of color. And I guess Jessica's comments allude to this too, that that they're hard to reach. And so I would hope that going forward, that you really try to be more selective instead of just, sort of using that term, community-based organizations. That's so broad that it can apply to almost anything. So we really want to get to organizations that are, can really help an impacted community. And, it's not necessarily a criticism of EBCE, because I realize that even nonprofits have a hard time reaching disadvantaged communities on the ground where they are. And so I guess what I'm doing is I want to urge you to continue your efforts in this area. Don't rely on these larger organizations that you hope will put you into contact with smaller organizations or, really communities of great need. I don't know how you can, what else you can do, but I think you should really make a bigger effort to reach these communities of color, of impacted areas, So anyway, thank you very much. I hope a lot of good will come out of this. Thanks.
Thank you. If there are no further public comment.
Thank you, Andrew. I know a lot of us on the board or the advisory committee have to reach out to organizations that can make a difference, that can understand how to apply. I know I understood one organization of the 4 in 2019 that was doing some work on the ground, and proud to support that grant back then. And I think there were smaller grants. These ones being larger might be a heavier lift. So it'll be interesting what we take feedback from this committee this evening. I see advisory member Souza.
Hi. I do know that Rising Sun has been around for quite some time, and so has the Cypress Mandela, and they are directly associated with the underprivileged societies, communities. They teach people, minorities. So I mean, yeah, they're very good organizations. I can't speak to the other one, but I have directly worked with both of those, and those two, Cypress Mandela and the Rising Sun. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. We've provided grants in the past to both Cypress Mandela and Rising Sun, and yeah, they've been great to work with. Thank you.
Chair, and I'll recognize our member here in the room. And Olivia?
Recognize the members in the room. Do that first.
Ready?
So, JP, thanks. A question about the first proposed grant. I didn't see in any of the notes that are following the presentation, any particular groups that you were looking at working with. One, would that first grant for educational material, would that cover professional development for teachers? And have you, and who, if anyone, are you thinking of working with, or on that?
Well, yeah, I think this gets to the kind of the open solicitation measure, which is we want to be, issuing a grant with what are the outcomes that we want to be seeing, and then based on the proposals that come back, select what we think is going to deliver on those solutions. So sure, it could be educational materials, it could be training for educators, it could be a CBO who already, who has curriculum and wants to expand that curriculum and go use it in, in those, primary and secondary environments. I actually don't, I think that's what we want to issue a solicitation and see, who comes back with that. There are good folks in the community who are doing kind of, primary and secondary school educational work. And so, we would want to see, who could propose something that that meets those objectives.
And follow up. Thanks, Jay.
It's wide open.
Yeah, thank you. So I would just say, so for that first proposed grant, and you just said, I believe you just said it would be covered, but I know that a reason that curriculum is not adopted by teachers is they don't have the time and they're not recompensated for professional development. So just definitely professional development should be included in what, if this proposed grant is one of the ones that goes through, professional development should be one of the things that's explicitly allowed. Thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Member Laundrie?
Yes, I'd like to lift up some of the comments that I heard from the public. One is that I think that, the smaller organizations do not necessarily have professionals or grant writers. So to the extent that, the process could be simplified so that there is access, I would like to bring that up and, support simplification wherever possible. And then secondly, the other idea was that I heard is innovation. And while these topics are very good, there might be, an idea from the community or from a group that we may not have thought about. So to the extent that there's a category for non-prescriptive category, if I'm saying that clearly, I would welcome that also. And I do like the idea of having also smaller, like $50,000 grants also in addition to the larger ones. But thank you.
Thank you, member. Chair Eldred, I'll get to you in a second. Do you still have comments, or should I go to member who?
Go to member who. Do me last.
Yes, go ahead.
Great. Hi, can folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, thanks so much for this presentation, JP and team. I too was part of the workshop in June, and so it's fun to see all these ideas kind of materialize, and it's really exciting to hear kind of the thought process that staff has gone through in order to figure out the direction moving forward. I think of the items that you proposed, I really strongly support numbers 3 and 4. I think those are really exciting, very timely. They seem really consistent with what we've heard from members of the public at CAC meetings consistently, and then definitely at that community workshop specifically. I do also want to lift up the comments from Jessica Tovar in terms of thinking about, what is there an opportunity to perhaps earmark some of the funds to offer smaller grants? I think it's actually a really, really unique and vital role that EBCE could offer in order to make sure that these smaller organizations that often do serve those hard to reach communities that Audrey in particular was talking about, so that they can actually have more of the space to ideally go after other kinds of grants maybe down the line. I think you mentioned, obviously, there's a lot of, federal, state, other kinds of funding that is out there. But, the reality is those really small, very strapped organizations, they need kind of an influx to even get there to make sure that they have essentially proof of concept for the things that they're often already doing unfunded or underfunded. So I wanted to offer that. I think there's a really key gap that EBCE can fill there in order to make sure that we are adequately supporting kind of the full breadth of our communities. And then I do also want to echo that piece on trying our best to reduce admin burden. So if we're able to pursue that kind of dual track and offer those, I don't know if they qualify as mini grants, if they're that award range, but for the smaller grants would really, really recommend, as light of a touch as possible in terms of the application itself. And I do remember from the workshop, there was, I think, a lot of excitement around trying to offer, some sort of consistent, maybe almost on retainer technical assistance or grant writing support for a number of different kinds of organizations in EBCE territory. I don't know how that interfaces with the grant kind of structure that we're talking about, but I wanted to make sure that that nugget didn't get lost, because I actually loved that suggestion from staff. And I think there's so many, communities and organizations that would really benefit from something like that.
Thank you, Member Hu. I think I heard you say you're lifting up smaller grants, and did you mention something about having like a liaison from staff to help with the organizations with the grants? Is that what you're saying too?
That is not what I was saying. I was advocating for a previous suggestion from staff to offer essentially on retainer or like some kind of intermediary support for those smaller capacity organizations to help them with grant writing or putting together a budget, or, let's have a shared brainstorm space for folks that are in the public health and climate space and kind of think through how your ideas or activities that you currently already deliver in communities, how that might align with different grant opportunities. So I was thinking basically much further upstream, but something that could, help kind of fill those pretty key gaps that we tend to see in those organizations.
Great, so more on coaching, mentoring, some guidance, a one-on-one to getting funding and, really moving forward in their effort and their vision in the community. Got it. Thank you. Member Lutz.
Yeah, JP, I really like these ideas. They look great. A couple sort of specific questions about them. The one on community ownership of EV charging stations. Would the CBOs, the organizations that are hosting the charging station, would they get any economic benefit from it? Would they get a cut of the charge that is, I don't know, a finder's fee or a commission or a percentage of,
right?
Because that could help a lot of organizations.
Yeah, so that's actually up to the participating organization. So they can give, it would generally be behind their meter. And so in talking about this, it would be wide open. If people wanted to provide kind of free charging, that's up to them. If they want to charge for the electricity delivered or charge for, you know, per hour charge, you know, that's up to them. We didn't feel like it was our place to dictate that, and that instead it would be more up to the participating site hosts.
Okay. On the resilience hub and community development, that was a impressive one that I've heard a lot of organizations would really like to try to do. So I'm glad to see that. One, and sort of a related question, how would the contract work with EBCE? Because the resilience hub, hopefully they've got more generation than they need. And so it's not like a net metering thing, especially when there's no emergency and they aren't operating as a resilience hub. Would there be some contract between EBCE to use those resources as part of a virtual power plant for not only the community's benefit, but for EBCE's benefit? And, you know, obviously when the grid goes down, the power goes down, they have to be islandable. And that would be the main benefit of it. So I'm just wondering what sort of financial contracts and capabilities both would the EBC vision with these community, with the resilience hubs once they're up?
Sure. Yeah, so with our municipal critical facilities program, those solar and battery systems will be net metered. You know, that's kind of how they're interconnected into the grid, and then there's a standard net metering agreement, and then yeah, we are kind of always looking for ways to aggregate batteries into a VPP and get some resource adequacy or load shifting, load modification value out of those, similar to what we do with our resilient home VPP. So we would be looking for ways to aggregate those batteries to reduce our high carbon, high cost energy procurement, as well as our resource adequacy obligation. But the standard agreement, you know, is generally going to be an interconnection and NEM agreement, because it is a behind the meter solar and storage system, and that's how those systems get interconnected into PG&E's distribution system.
That seems like a very limiting way to do it. I mean, if they have a big roof and room for a big battery way beyond what electricity is, you know, I'm thinking not so much for city buildings, but schools with, you know, huge roof areas. Why do you limit it to net metering? But if, you know, if that's a CPUC restriction, maybe that there should be efforts to, you know, open that up or allow exceptions for it. I mean,
sure. I mean, I've looked at, you know, about 350 roofs in our territory across all sorts of different sectors, and 95% of them are roof limited as far as the amount of solar you can put on. So there's definitely some use cases where you have a lot of extra roof, but that's really not the norm in most roofs.
Okay. I'm thinking of, you know, spread out elementary and high schools, schools, but that's not, you know.
Yeah, I mean, just when you take in, you know, air conditioning, shading, parapets, all sorts of, you know, it's just, there are certainly roofs where you've got more roof than load. You know, public storage is, you know, there's use cases where that's the case, but in most cases, you know, if buildings are used and they've got any kind of, you know, especially if they have any kind of space conditioning, you're generally going to be roof constrained. Is, at least in my experience, that's what we've seen in the commercial space.
Okay. Last question on the clean energy jobs. Would you put in an effort to coordinate with unions on those? You're doing the job training with Mandela, with Rising Sun, but you know, does that actually lead to real jobs? And can you connect with unions to lead them to apprenticeships that would connect them into really good jobs? And then you talk about that.
Sure. So we have a separate set of workforce development grants, and we actually just had a call last week with CTWI and the Alameda County Building Trades Commission about kind of those jobs and how to link them up for union work. You know, I think that this grant is a little bit earlier, but certainly vocational training and union training and kind of the union opportunities would certainly be something we'd be keying in there.
Okay. That's it.
Thank you. Member Laundrie, did you have something else? Did you want to say something else earlier?
I just wanted to say that when I made my comment earlier, I meant to say also that I wanted to see some technical assistance perhaps that EBC could provide to smaller capacity organizations. And I think that Cypress Mandela is a conduit for union jobs. It's my understanding. Just to clarify that.
Thank you. Chair Aldred, you're up.
The muting is hard. Thank you so much. All right, so I've had the benefit of being able to think about this for a bit longer because I was able to sit with JP and go through it when we were preparing for this meeting. I really want to thank you for the thoughtfulness that goes into not only this, but all the things that you bring to this organization. It's just really impressive. I sat down and I talked to a couple folks, not a ton of them, but a couple of them over the last few days, and really tried to sit back with my notes that I took during that meeting and after that workshop, which was great fun. Although the one that we were in person was different than the ones that people participated in online. And I still hope that we get to do the same process that the online folks did. And so kind of from that, I've boiled my ideas down to a couple things. The first one is kind of in response to the request from folks for smaller grants and the need for, small local organizations to be able to participate. And I think about my day job with the county, and everything that we do, all of our funds have a requirement for small, local, and emerging business participation. And it seems like we should have the same kinds of goals, maybe not the same percentage. I would actually suggest a considerably higher percentage, but that we build what we're doing specifically to keep our dollars local. And Audrey mentioned that earlier, how the definition of CBO is so encompassing, and looking at how complicated that last process was, even when there were local participants, they were dependent on those big groups to be able to apply to carry out that scope. And that means that money isn't staying in our community in the same sort of way. And it isn't supporting the organizations that are out there who have been doing this work that have made it possible for us to be adopted at the kind of rate that we are. So I would really like to see us include SLEB participation in our grant design. I also want to see us be less restrictive in our grant concepts. So kind of to illustrate that, I actually really like Member Hu really like 3 and 4. I think these are definitely things that I heard in the workshops. They're reflective of needs that have been brought out pretty consistently. But the second one, it poses some real challenges for me, especially if the like you said, that people could like how and what is going to be charged is going to be left up to whoever the community partner is, the host partner. If this isn't a small, like really small, really local organization, then it seems like this could really backfire. And instead of being so restrictive in what that grant is about, I think when we talked, the issue that you were trying to get at is addressing some of the social, economic, and environmental inequities inside of electric vehicle adoption, including charging stations. And the idea of community ownership of the charging stations is a solution, and it's one that somebody came up with. But if instead of saying, how are you going to do this solution, you put the grant out as the problem, like you make it how to use EV charging stations to address X issue, or ideas for addressing environmental and social justice issues with EV adoption and utilization, including charging, and then you see what answers you get back. Instead of prescribing the solution in the grant concept, I think that we may get much better, we could get much better solution options, even if they aren't adopted in this. It could be something that feeds us going forward. And the first one, I really would like to see be more open and less marketing feeling, for sure. And I don't know, just like if the goal is education, then talk about education, as opposed to it's got to be this way. It almost feels like you're writing this for an organization, which is harder. I'll go quicker. So building up the comment from Member Hu on the administrative burden, I think that we've seen it be really successful to offer technical assistance for smaller, for us it's companies, but here it would be organizations who want to apply for grants. And so definitely want to see that reflected. And again, highlighting, I think the process that staff came up with last time was really successful. And I would want to see that same process for reviewing and awarding grants be followed. So those are my primary comments, and I am back in a place that I can take back over. If you have comments, though, Vice Chair Hernandez, that would be very appropriate.
Sure, thank you, Chair. I'm hearing that you'll take over the meeting. My comments supportive of providing community grants again. Really enjoyed the review and award process. If we can make the grant process application not burdensome or difficult, maybe at certain levels, that would be helpful. I know I'm a part of another board where we offer grants, and smaller grants might be a one-pager versus larger grants might be more extensive. So it just depends how extensive and how much money you're willing to grant versus smaller, not sponsorships, but really grants towards sort of the 4 categories. I think the 4 categories are good processes to educate our future generation, provide some charging solutions so we can have more adoption of EV vehicles in the community where it's needed most, and it doesn't have a solution there for previous research and study. The hubs are important, those are great. And that career pathways in this clean energy job section or sector is important too. So again, I hear what you're saying about not solving for the problems, providing opportunities for people to have places or spaces to discuss how to leverage this money and move it forward based on the committee feedbacks. I think it's important, and those are my comments.
Excellent. Okay, so are there any further comments, or can we recognize that it is 8:31 and that was for me, not for y'all, and go to the next item?
I think they want to chair. I think JP wanted an action item from this committee. Is this right?
No, this is information.
Not this one then? Thank you.
It was changed information.
Again. Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
JP, do you feel like you got clear feedback from us?
Yeah, I do. Thank you for that. I think there's definitely a bunch of feedback that we can take on board here, and we're excited to keep working forward and get these out.
Thanks so much, and it's really great to see these coming forward. Thank you for the presentation and your work, always in dedication of the community. All right, so 8:31, we're going to do this as quick as possible because we are we're way over time, frankly. So the next one is the SunZia project agreement, which is an action item. Which member of staff will be presenting this?
That's me, Jim Dorrance.
Thank you, Jim.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Good answers. In the interest of time, the presentation here, which will be given to the board, is a lot of the background on our RFO. So I'm going to just speak directly from the memo, and I'm happy to go into the presentation if we want, but I think I'm just going to speak about the kind of what we're asking here. Is that okay with everyone?
That would be encouraged.
Okay. So we're asking the board to adopt a resolution to allow us to execute a contract with a project company that's named SunZia Wind Power Co. And this is a wind project in New Mexico that's directly interconnected to the Cal ISO. It's a pretty large project in total. They're projecting 3,515 total megawatts. It's a project that has a lot of interest from California utilities, CCAs, and the like, because Western or kind of Southwestern wind has a very favorable energy pattern, which means that it's not coincident to solar. So it fits well just from kind of an energy hedge balancing perspective. EBCE is moving through with an agreement and asking the board for permission for us to execute for 150 megawatts from the SunZia complex for a term of 15 contract years. Again, the project's in New Mexico. It would provide both the generation, so the RECs that we use for our customers, in addition to resource adequacy and an energy hedge to help us financially mitigate the kind of prices in the Cal ISO market. I'm going to pause there and then talk kind of generally about what we're trying to do through our RFO. But yeah, let me just do that. That's the best way to go. So EBCE kicked off our 4th request for offers, which is the kind of primary place where we bring larger projects into our portfolio. This started in March of this year, and now here we are in October, and this is the first project we're bringing to the board. This process takes a lot of diligence from our team when we look at potentially 150 plus different offer variations across anywhere from 30 to 40 different unique projects. And we measure the projects along each other using a bunch of qualitative and quantitative measurements. The quantitative ones being a net present value calculation that allows us to compare the projects across each other. And that includes evaluating kind of a combination of forward curves, which are procured methods of people's forward estimation of what the energy markets are. And so we use a series of these kind of amalgamated together to give us kind of a large swath of potential outcomes for the forward energy markets. And then we get an NPV value for each project. Now, obviously, these forward curves are our forecasts. So this tool basically allows us to in an apples to apples comparison, compare the projects to each other. Now that's part of it, but another important feature to this is the qualitative measurements that we use. And obviously what's most important to EBCE, I mean, I wouldn't say most important, but very important, is to have the projects in territory. And so those projects that have an in-territory steel in the ground project get a lot of extra points more compared to the other projects. Now, the SunZia project came through with a really favorable NPV, and we are and did evaluate projects that were local, but this one was kind of the first one that we moved across with the negotiations that we feel pretty strongly about, that fits really well with our portfolio. So I talked about our request for offer process. I talked about, at a high level, how we evaluate this. And again, what we're asking the board to do is adopt to authorize the CEO to execute the agreement for that 150 megawatts of New Mexico wind from the SunZia project over a 15-year term. I'll pause there. I know that was a lot. I apologize. Yeah, I didn't do a good job explaining, or
it's that mute button again. Sorry, that
Okay.
that was a lot. That was really good. That was clear, at least to me. Do we have? Would you like to take comment at this point?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, great. Do we have any members of the public with their hands raised on this?
There are no members of the public with their hands raised at this time.
Great, then we will take comments or questions from the CAC. Are there members with comments or questions on this? All right. I don't. All right. So, Mickey, would you like to go first, Member Souza?
Sure. Yeah. I just quickly, you mentioned something like the California Authority, and we were just going over all of the imported measurements, the PC2, that would that affect would it negatively impact the amount of CO2 counted against EBCE, or Ava Community Energy? Since it is imported, would it count against EBCE? That's it.
Thank you very much. That's a really, really good question, especially because we were just talking about that too. So the answer is no. And so when we talk about kind of the classifications of the different REC flavors, the PCC2 is one where the actual renewable energy doesn't flow into the state of California. And so so first, this project shows up as a PCC1, and the value of it to California utilities is that the project itself has a firm line of transmission into the Cal ISO. And so the renewable energy common and needed among PCC1s flows directly into the state. So it's not actually considered an import, for one. And then two, that renewable energy is serving California load. And so no, there's no emissions hit it. It looks just like a solar plant in your backyard, PCC1. It shows up the same way for the purposes of RPS and emissions accounting.
Well, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Member Swaminathan?
Jim, I congratulate you folks for contracting with this project. And I think what you said, it's complementary to the solar profile. So I think it's a good fit, and I support this project. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right.
Member Pacheco had his hand raised.
Great, Member Pacheco.
Yeah, Jim, does the local environmental and EJ community in New Mexico in those three counties, is there any support or opposition to this project?
I'm not going to give a strong endorsement of that, but I have a large packet of stuff that the seller sent me this morning that I haven't looked at. But the community really in New Mexico has really enjoyed kind of the amount of jobs that these have created, these projects, and also in general, the renewable component to it in the Southwest has been really well looked upon. And it is a large project, and you can't make that large of a project without impacts to the land around it. But the organization who builds it, the developers, Pattern Energy, and we also have our Western Spirit Tekaloti project with them, and we feel like they really do benefit the community, and that they've returned that service to the communities that they've built in as well. I could look over the documents and see if there's anything additional in there. I just didn't get a chance to look at them today. But there's a lot of that stuff that they share with us, which is pretty typically is advocacy from the communities around there for the build. I just didn't get a chance to get through it.
Thank you. Yeah, I would be curious if there's any letters of support from Enviro and EJ groups out there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take a look.
Okay, thank you. So are there any other comments from this body? Or
Vice Chair Hernandez has his hand raised.
Pardon?
Vice Chair Hernandez has his hand raised. We also have one hand raised from the public.
Okay, Member Hernandez, and then we'll take the comment from the public.
Thank you, Chair. Your evaluation process, you talked about NPV scores were really good. Is there anywhere you share that metric or matrix of information, the rubric on this project or the other projects? I might have not seen this in the past, but I just heard it for the first time hearing it for myself. So it has a score of 0 to 55 based on the presentation that we didn't go over. How did it score on that? Did it score high, or how does this look in regards to the review process?
Yeah, personally, I'm not comfortable sharing kind of how it's stacked against the other projects, but please ask it at the board meeting if you're there. I just don't know if we're willing to give out that information because we're currently negotiating other contracts with it as well. Not that that can compromise it, but I don't share that stuff. What I can share is that the NPV for it was very favorable, and it was one of the projects that were in kind of in our shortlist ones initially and stayed there as well as we kind of continued our diligence.
And I'll add some comments. I know in the past it's hard to understand what is the megawatt cost per hour because we were like, it's confidential, you're negotiating agreements. But I think always a challenge to know, okay, how do you score on the metric for these bodies to get a sense of how good of a project is it, qualitatively and quantitatively. And now you have a metric here that gives you a sense of how strong it is. But I don't think it tips your hand if it's going to be something you don't negotiate or do negotiate, or the rates or not the rates. So I think there's always that question, how good of a project is it for the advisory board and the board to understand what are we getting into agreements with without really knowing the project value or the cost. So that would be my feedback, and then I'll be there at the board of directors meeting and I'll bring up the comments in lieu of Chair Eldred. So I'll ask the question there. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you. And again, it was favorable. And let me just kind of make one comment about the NPV as well that makes it better for worse, is that again, it relies heavily on what is the value of that energy over a 15-year horizon under kind of many different assumptions, electrification ×2, Diablo retirement -5, and all kinds of different assumptions about what could occur in the energy market. But they're inherently all guesses and forecasts. And so we can derive kind of a perceived value of the project over time, but really they're only as good as the forecast behind them. That's why we use a lot. 6 is a lot, more than we've ever used in the RFOs. But again, I think the main tool is allowing that to compare the projects among each other with kind of the same parameters of the forward market. And again, this one showed up very favorable from that quantitative perspective. But again, it's out of state, but it's a developer that we know can build the things, and those kind of really push it towards the top.
Thank you.
Member Pacheco has his hand raised as well.
We'll go first to member of the public, and then we'll come back to member Pacheco.
Thank you. Local Clean Energy Alliance, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Yeah,
We're gonna switch to Jessica. Can you try and keep it to 2 minutes? We're at 8:44.
Yeah, I'll be short. Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. Sorry, I had missed comment. I had stepped away, but I always cringe at long-term contracts that are out of state, because it really is. I do see it as really outsourcing the work. but I do want to ask, like, what kind of jobs these are? Like, are these union jobs that are going to be created in New Mexico? I didn't hear any questions about the type of jobs. I did hear about inquiries about environmental justice, which is totally valid as well. Yeah, I just personally, you know, as local Clean Energy Alliance, we value doing a lot of local energy production for the creation of the jobs and the economic stability that we need within the territory of EBC AVA. That's all. Clean power to the people.
Thank you, Jessica. Member Pacheco? And then we're gonna.
Yeah, following up on my question about if there was any local environmental or EJ support or opposition, and I was looking through the package right now, and I trust staff that this may make sense for price per megawatt hour, and but I just want to point out that this does not fit our stated values of local. It is not necessarily, we do not know, it's that insufficient to know whether or not it fits our values of environmentally sound and EJ appropriate. It may be, but we don't know. And I do see a line in here that the developer is committed to paying prevailing wage, which may be a requirement whether they want to or not, and seeks union labor to the extent. But also, so following up, I'd be interested whether or not there are any letters or statements from labor out there in support or opposition. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna echo the not local part. I'm also gonna echo the good job with a project that feeds into the grid. That's great, and the Southwest wind profile is beautiful. I would be interested to see the, like, what landscape is this in? Are we?
We lost you, Gerald. You're muted.
Oh, I have been on mute the whole time. That is unfortunate.
It's difficult to hear you.
Hear any of that I just said?
Chair Eldred, is your voice is very faint.
Are you there?
We can just
We can barely hear you.
Okay. So I would like to echo the concerns around not local. I also want to say good job on a project that feeds directly into the California grid and has that Southwest wind profile, as it is very desirable wind profile, especially looking at our load. And would also like to see whether the project is in alignment with some of the stances that as an organization we've taken around the protection of desert habitat and those kinds of things. So I would want to see those or have better answers from staff before we made a recommendation to support. I can't imagine the board is not going to support this issue, but I would want to see those things or have answers to those, so maybe they can be included in Wednesday's presentation. And if we have a motion to support or a motion to oppose or whatever it is, then we can hear it now. This is an action item if we choose it to be. It does not have to be. Is there a motion from anyone or not?
And Olivia, sorry to pause, but I do have that letter of support from the organizations. Is that worth sharing before we go down this aisle, or should I just keep it to myself?
Yeah, which letter of support is it?
This is for the SNZIA project from the environmental groups.
Yeah, definitely do that.
I can screen share it. Is that what works
That would
best?
be great. That would be great.
Let me see here.
But you have received a letter of support from the environmental groups.
I have.
And
I'm gonna Slack it to Adrian to screen share. I think that should be the easiest way, right?
Or I just made you co-host.
Okay, you did too. Thanks. Here we go. So this is what I received from the seller. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
So it's just, again, the general environmental groups and the union groups as well. Let me see if I can make this bigger. Oh, it's really big. How's that?
Well,
The full screen was.
And again, apologies for not pulling this up earlier.
Can that be read out in part?
Yes, I cannot read it from here, but I can.
Heard about this.
All right, so the business and union groups seem to be predominantly chambers of commerce and that kind of thing. And although it does have the building trades as well, there is a section of grassroots social justice and nonprofits. This is a very interesting cross section of groups. And environmental groups, there's a list of them as well. So from the Audubon Society to the conservation voters, and some that look kind of smaller and more local. All right, so do we have a motion from any members of the CAC?
I would like to move to approve.
To support?
Yes.
Great. Is there a second?
I second that. I first of all, I love local projects. The one thing I realize is that sometimes the project is not in our backyard because of the amount of wind power that it might produce. That kind of hurts. But at the same time, I think this is very well thought out. Appreciate all the endorsements as well. So yes.
So we have a motion by member Swaminathan and a second by member Souza. If we could do a roll call vote.
Discussion.
Is there further discussion?
Yeah, sure.
So what I want to say is that, this does add to our renewable portfolio, as I understand this. I would like to see the next project be a similar project in Alameda County or in San Joaquin County, or in our area, where we would be supporting our own local development and creating jobs for the members in this community. I will support this, but I do hope that future projects will be in our territory to the extent that you can find them. So thank you for allowing me to say that, Anne.
All right, thank you, member Landry. Is there further discussion?
Chair, I'll just bolster that comment. It's important to be local. We have to find ways to do that and possibly incorporate that into the evaluation rubric. I mean, expanding the areas. I mean, if you're going to be scoring these projects in certain ways, we had the complements of the organizational values that we want to see more of these elements of the environmental justice, having letters of support, being local, the types of jobs specifically. I think those points that this committee brings are valid to add to that rubric. Not just is it, execution by the parties, its competitive offer, and the status. You need to expand that rubric to really bring back the entire organizational values from the community. Because it's the East Bay Community Energy still, and we'll talk about Ava Community Energy, but we still have community in the wording. So I think that's the part we're missing.
The rubric does include those qualifiers and heavily weighted towards local
Sorry,
development.
Jim, if I can finish my comments, thank
Sorry.
you. So this is the part where we discuss it as advisory members, and I appreciate your qualifying it, but I'm just saying this is the feedback portion of the meeting where we'll vote on it and we'll ask for additional input if we can. But I think that's the element of, I was gonna make those comments. I'll stop there. I want to be respectful, but at the point that these are elements that maybe ought to be consideration, not demanding anything, but food for thought. Thank you.
All right, did staff want to make a comment there?
Yeah, and I apologize for the interruption too. I guess I felt bad for not being clear enough in the presentation that we do weight the project towards being locally developed, and we do weight it towards the mission statement of what EBC intends and tries to do with our project. I didn't want that to be lost in the shuffle that we don't include that in the qualitative, because we do. And so again, apologies for interrupting. I didn't want that to be confused. I didn't think I might not have articulated that well when I presented that it is included in how we evaluate.
All right, thank you so much. So we have a motion and a second on the table. Is there further discussion on this item?
Member Pacheco has his hand raised.
Okay, we're gonna avoid reiterating the things that have already been said. You can just say support, or if you have an additional comment, go for it, Member Pacheco.
Yeah, I support the comments made by Member Landry, and then Member Hernandez. And I would just say that that letter mollifies me a bit, or puts me a little bit more at ease, but it's still not local. And I understand that you're doing that. Not everything is going to be local, but I will have to abstain. I just don't have enough information to take an official position on this tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Abstention is a just fine way to vote. The motion is to support staff's recommendation to the board to authorize the CEO to go into contract with SunZia for a 150 megawatt project in New Mexico that ties directly into the California grid. Is that an accurate representation of the motion? Member Swaminathan.
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Then, we will call discussion, and please do a roll call vote.
Before I call the vote, I just want to ask if Member Hugh can indicate if, with a raised hand, if the 925-76831.
That number, just do, yep. I do believe that Member Who has rejoined as but don't read her number out.
Oh, my apologies. I will
yes, that I would suspect that is her number.
Great, thank you. Great. Member Landry.
Yes.
Member Hugh. Member Hugh. Member Liu.
Lisa, just before you move on, there is a motion to support the staff recommendation for the going into contract with SunZia for 150 megawatt wind farm in New Mexico that ties into the California grid. That's the motion if you want to vote at the end.
Yes, thank you for the recap. Can you hear me like this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Apologies, technical difficulties. I had to miss part of the presentation, so I'll abstain. Thank you.
Members Swaminathan.
Aye.
Member Lakshman. Lakshman. Member Souza.
Aye.
Member Pacheco.
Abstain.
Member Carr.
Yes, aye.
Member Lewis.
Abstain.
Vice Chair Hernandez.
Yes.
Chair Eldridge.
Do we still have quorum?
Yes, we want to. 6, 7, yes, we do. Yes, we have one.
All right, and what's the current vote count?
We have 1,
5 to 3.
excuse me?
5 to 3.
5.
5 yes, no, 0, 3 abstentions.
All right, then I will abstain.
Same. Okay.
But that is still a majority of members present, so the motion passes, correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. So with that, we will move on to the final item of the evening. I know several of us are now sitting in our cars in front of our public locations. So please, for those folks who are not in this situation, be conscientious of time. So the last item for discussion is the JPA amendment for the name change. And who is presenting that?
Chair Eldred, Alex DeGiorgio. I'm happy to present this item for you.
Thanks, Alex. Let's make this one as quick as you can.
Sure, I don't think that will be too challenging. This is a very straightforward item. Good evening, Vice Chair Hernandez, members of the committee, members of the public. Yes, so this item is to amend the joint powers agreement to reflect the name change to Ava Community Energy. So as you all are aware, in June, the board passed a resolution to approve the brand change to Ava Community Energy. And this is just kind of a formal legal extension of that, which would be reflected in the joint agreement. And by the rules of the, by the rules of the joint powers agreement, it requires a 2/3 vote. And this is the reason behind this is that it was felt by staff and with our legal counsel that this would be preferable to doing business as, a DBA designation with respect to the legal maneuvering of the agency, whether it be in contracts, the name of the agency on the PG&E bill, and again, for all legal and public facing purposes. This is what's been done by other our sister CCAs who have gone through a similar rebranding process. So that's the item before you, is to amend the JPA to reflect the change to Ava Community Energy. I'd be happy to take questions.
Great. The one clarifier really quick, there are no other JPA amendments that are riders to this. There's no other wording changes, additions, subtractions, clarifications, or deletions? Alex? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I might be having difficulties. Can folks hear me out there?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, I was Chair Eldred.
It's crazy. All right, let's take the motion.
Alex, if you could please turn off your video, that might help with
Yeah, can you hear me now?
You're breaking.
Yes. But you are breaking up.
Okay, well, the answer to the question is yes.
Okay, great, thank you. This change and no other changes. Fantastic. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this topic?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Great. Are there any members of the CAC who wish to speak on this topic?
Quick question clarifying on the minutes, Chair. Is the advisory committee structure changed or defined in this document?
My understanding is that Alex just said that the only thing that is being suggested here with zero exception is the name change. Is that correct? correct, Alex, or did I misunderstand you?
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right. Is Alex, are you asking for an action this evening?
This is listed as an action item.
Okay, so if somebody would like to make a motion to support.
Motion support staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay, motion to support by Vice Chair Hernandez, second by Member Pacheco. If we could please have a roll call vote.
Yes, Member Landry.
Yes.
Member Hugh.
Abstain.
Member Liu. Member Swaminathan.
Yes.
Member Lakshman. Member Pacheco.
Yes.
Member Susan.
Yes.
Member Carr.
Yes.
Member Lewis.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hernandez.
Yes.
Chair Eldridge.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Excellent. So we will now move to the next agenda item. That is announcements or requests that we have not yet heard to be put onto future agendas. Is there any members of the public? Wishing to comment?
Public with their hands raised.
Okay, great. Are there any members of the CAC who wish to make an announcement or request that something be on a future agenda? All right, seeing none, I have one.
Yes, oh, my apologies. Member Landry has her hand raised.
Yes.
All right, Member Landry.
I know we have periodically visited this, but I would like to ask where we are in the in-house call center. And I know it's not a whole lot of jobs, but there's some jobs and you know, I know currently, I believe it's being contracted out to Sacramento. I don't know when that contract ends, but I would like to see those jobs obviously be brought into our community. So if I could get an update or where that is, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
I sort of think that CEO Chesed said they had no desire to ever do that. But we will definitely re-up that. On that line, we're looking at two other things that need to come back to this body and this board if we're going to have decisions made on them. One of them is the 14 something million dollars or 12.75, I don't remember the number, million dollars that is in this year's budget that might be used for one-time on-bill credits, but doesn't have to be. And the second is that $14.75 million that during the budget discussion, staff said they would bring back so we could take a look at what that money could be used for. So I'd really like to get those things, and I would like to re-up that. There's been multiple requests to find out what the $5 million from that $15 million Healthy Homes and grant, 5 million of that has been approved, and we'd like an update on what that's being spent on and how. And so that is the things that I remember. Are there any other things from the public?
Member Landry has her hand raised.
All right, go for it.
I heard earlier this evening, a comment from the public, relative to how many jobs we were creating, how many jobs, East Bay Community Energy was creating within our, territorial, within our borders rather. So at some, I'd like to see an update of how many jobs we've actually, created, please.
We've received this request from several things and, yeah, we would love to see that. And maybe, maybe Vice Chair Hernandez, you can bring, this up to the board on Wednesday as well, this list of things. Okay, so,
One
are
last,
there other members with their hand raised?
yes, one last thing, Chair. I just have a question in regards to the real estate asset that East Bay Community Energy acquired. What's their intention with it? I think they talked about leasing space now, extending that, but that building or office that they acquired, I'm not sure what the intent of, but if there is going to be a demand or interest to build more resiliency hubs, that could be a nice place possibly for it.
Okay, so an update on that absolutely should get added to there. We can't have discussion on it, but you could say, well, let's talk about it. So,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, that's great.
An example of such a conversation that could happen.
All right, thank you, Ed. Okay, so is there any further discussion on this? No, then we will adjourn this meeting. The next Community Advisory Committee meeting is on November 13th at 6 p.m. And we will see you all then. If the clerk could please give me a quick call right after this meeting, it would be helpful. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
All right.
Bye.